For the next part of this exercise, I'm going to talk about placing an image to use in your artwork or your project. Now, InDesign has part of the functionality of it being an application to do large projects, multi-page documents, books. Part of that is the fact that InDesign, built in, doesn't allow you to have massive files. So instead of having all of your images embedded, you could have a 500 megabyte image embedded on one page and a 30 megabyte image embedded on another page. Therefore, as pages go on, you're creating the book, the file, your InDesign file could become enormous, and then you have RAM problems, you have rendering problems. So how InDesign circumvents that is that you place images into it and you provide a link to the original file. So in this case, if we're looking at our polka dot image folder, I have 5 images here, and these are just JPEGs taken from the internet, polka dot inspired images, as well as a little logo that I created in Illustrator and saved as an EPS. Now you can place any type of file in InDesign. You can video files, image files, audio files, what have you. And you can put EPS, TIFF, JPEG, AI files, Photoshop files. It really doesn't matter. You can learn about different file types and the compression rate and the file size that entails, but you can really just do anything. For printing, you have to remember that you always need 300 dpi at whatever size that you're printing at. So for instance, if you have a full page ad in a magazine and you want the image to bleed off the edge, you're going to probably need a image that's going to be at least about 8 3/4 or 9 inches by 11 1/4. So you always have to make sure that your file resolution and your file size and your image size is what you need for the end use. And so you can do that by just opening individual images in Photoshop and checking the resolution of them. But if you're just, for the sake of our exercises, we're just using images that we've gotten off Google, if we've gotten off a stock imagery site, we've got it off Creative Commons. So for our sake, file size doesn't really matter, but when you're working in the real world, you have to be very careful about your image size is correct for printing. So a minimum of 300 dpi. Actually, why don't I just quickly show you what that means? So if I just drag this image into Photoshop in my bottom deck here, and it was just going to just take hopefully a few seconds, not very long, to open. There's Photoshop. So once it's open, I can go into image size, and it's obviously 72 dpi because I've gotten this from the internet. So this is going to, but if I want to make this print size, I have to make sure that my width, my height, and my resolution are linked. And it's just going to be slow because my computer is a little bit slow these days. And if I type in 300 dpi, I know that this image now is only usable at print size at 1.19 or 1.2 inches by 1.6 inches. So if I wanted to use this image for something that's actually going to be printed, that is the maximum size that I can use that image. So you have to be very, very careful about what images you choose and make sure that they're the right resolution. And you can't just check resample and change that to anything you want, because that actually just creates a blurry image. So don't do that. So I'm just going to cancel that for now. I'm going to quit Photoshop and I'm going to go back to InDesign. So like I said, InDesign doesn't allow, well, you can embed, but I do not recommend it. But the way that InDesign functions is I'm going to place an image, and therefore I need to maintain linking, so I don't want to lose my images, but I'm going to show you that later when we package the files. So right now I'm going to, first thing, I can do it in 2 different ways. InDesign, like any Adobe product, allows you to do pretty much the same thing in 3 different ways. So it's up to you how you want to do it. I like to draw a rectangle frame, use the rectangle frame tool first. And because we're using bleeds here, I'm going to draw that rectangle frame to that bleed line, which is that, remember, that is that red line on the outside of our page, and we get this crosshair rectangle. Crosshairs in the print world always mean an image. So I can't put type in there, I can't put a drawing, I have to put an image, otherwise a photograph. And then I want to go to File, Place, or Control D, locate the image that you want to use. So I just put them on the desktop here, and then you just double click on any one of them, and there you go. And that, it's turned out small, or it's placed very small, because that's actually the size of the image. Now I can do a variety of things here in order to change the size. So another thing to be wary of or be conscious of in InDesign is that, I'll go back to my selection tool, is we have a frame. So I can use my selection tool, the black arrow key here, to move the frame or change the size of the frame. I'm going to go Control Z to undo. And then I have my white arrow key, and the direct selection tool, what that does is it manipulates the image within the frame. So unlike using the black arrow tool, now when I click on using the direct selection tool, I'm going to manipulate that image within the frame. So this is where I can resize it. So I can click on one of the corner arrows or corner handles here and press Shift in order to drag it proportionally. If I don't drag it, if I just don't press Shift, it's going to skew it and stretch it, and you can see at the top I've stretched it by 258 by 231. So I want to undo that. Now I can see back it's 100 by 100, so that's proportional. So if I just press Shift and drag, I'm going to be dragging the frame or the image within the frame proportionately. I also have the ability to resize it by these presets up here. So fill frame proportionally, if I do that, you'll see that I crop off a lot of the image, but I'm not skewing it in any way. I'm enlarged it here by 778 in both horizontal and vertically. I can also go back and then fit content proportionately, and it's just going to do that in this case. There's these other things here, fit content to frame, so that will just, there it will skew 778 by 439, and obviously it looks like an unnatural. So I go back, Control or Command Z, and fit frame to content. It will resize the frame that I created in order to just to the edge of the image. Go back, Control Z, and then I can kind of, there's a bunch of things, center content, etc. Or you can just go Shift and resize using one of your handles here. And then obviously you can move that image within the frame however you see fit. So just be aware that there's the frame tool, the black arrow key, and which moves the frame, the image, or the image frame. And you make sure that when you have that selected, that you can see the line here, the blue line appearing, and that's going to change depending on in your layers what color you have selected here. So that frame will change according to what color you have for your layer. And then use your white arrow key to change the image within that frame. Another way to do that is I'm just going back to my selection tool, and instead of, oh, see, there you go, I was just going to show you that. So InDesign, sometimes when that little hand appears, that's when you're manipulating the image within the frame. So you have to be a little bit careful of that. So if I just click off to the side here, click back on my selection tool, just click on the frame, and I'm moving the entire frame here. But if I double click now, I know that I am changing or manipulating the image within the frame. So you just have to be a little bit careful when you're, be careful what you're looking at is the arrow key to move the actual frame, or if you're using the white arrow key, that little hand appears and you're moving the image within the frame. Or you can also, when you're using the selection tool, double click on it, the image, and that will give you the option to choose and manipulate the image within the frame. Now you see here another thing that InDesign is doing is it is pixelating the image, and that's just a way for InDesign to keep the RAM moving very properly or very quickly. So it's not going to be rendering your images at high res all the time, because say for instance you have a huge book, you have 500 pages and you have images, high res images on all these pages. If it didn't kind of do this pixelization, it would really bog up the RAM and it would really slow down your system. So by default, InDesign pixelates the display so it doesn't bog up the RAM. And now the way to get around that is just do a right click, and this pop-up will come and you can just say display performance. And if you really want to, if you say you do have 500 images and you've been working with the document for a long time, you can even gray them. So that will really speed up the process. Right click again, display performance, typical, it's going to give you that pixelated. And if that's really bothering you, you can go display performance, high quality display, and it will give you a nice rendering. Now, if you have a really low res image, it's not going to make a big difference, but and you've blown it up a lot. But for our sake, that's fine.